Okay. What the hell? Alright, I hit it with a hammer a few times. Which I think only made my socket not fit. There it goes. Jesus Christ. Oh. The socket lives here now. Wow. Right in the way. Not too bad. I don't think this engine ever had a blown head gasket, but I'm doing as much of a build as I am, may as well change it. Alright, well, in this video, you are most likely going to see something that has, I don't think, ever been on this channel before. Rain. Because, like I said in the last video, I finally decided to suck it up and go to Harbor Freight and spend all of 150 bucks on this 10x10 canopy. So now I don't have to worry about the weather getting in my way, so I can finish this build on time without having to get rained out every other day of the week. With that being said, at the point you're seeing this, I've finished up all the angle mods and everything I need for the front suspension. I've finished up swapping the S13 rear end of this. I got brakes front and rear, bled with a hydraulic handbrake all set up for me. I already had the steering wheel hub installed, and obviously I got my racing seat mounted on a custom bracket. I know that excessive manufacturing makes a bracket for these cars. The reason I made my own one is because I have one and it doesn't sit quite high enough for my liking. I can barely see over the cluster and I'm not really comfortable with that, not really a seating position I prefer. So I made one that's about an inch higher than that one sits. But I am using the other one for the passenger side because I don't think any passengers really care how well they see over the dash, as long as they can kind of see over the dash. But anyway, now that I got this car to the point where it can sit on the ground, roll around, and stop itself, I think it's finally time to make it so that this car can move on its own as well. And so over the last 3 or 4 weeks now, I spent the time with at the machine shop several days, and having him do a few things himself too, and blasting things in his bead blaster, getting new parts ordered that I was missing before, just to make sure I have every single thing I need to finish up this engine, and it is ready to go now. So now, as far as modifications go, I'm honestly keeping this engine more or less stock. I have obviously the stock block, stock pistons, stock rods. I'm even reusing the old stock bearings. They're all in perfectly good shape. I took apart the entire rotating assembly, made sure all the bearings were in good shape, and nothing was really out of place. The only thing I ended up replacing with that was the piston rings, because they were pretty gummed up from just old oil throughout the years. This engine probably has about 150,000 miles on it originally. Obviously 0 now, but... So I got a brand new set of NPR piston rings in it, gapped, all good to go. All the pistons are installed. Gave it a nice fresh coat of paint just to make it look pretty. Obviously, I'm reusing the old oil pump, but I did completely disassemble it, clean everything up, and it's in perfect shape, 100% ready to go. New water pump, basic things like that. The only real modifications that I'm doing to this engine are reliability sort of thing. While I don't need most of these modifications initially, based because I'm just running more or less stock horsepower for now, I'm building this engine basically in a way that it will be able to be easily upgraded later, as far as like boosting it higher and making more power without having to tear it back down. So to go through a few of those mods, I got a PHR billet timing belt tensioner pulley bracket. The stock ones are apparently known to break at like higher RPMs or higher horsepower, one or the other. So that'll prevent that issue from happening. Obviously, I got the probably one of the most standard upgrades for an engine that's going to be boosted. I got some ARP head bolts. I'm keeping with the stock gasket kit from Toyota. The head gasket out of that's perfectly fine for any power level that I'm looking to push. I got the Gates upgraded timing belt. It's basically an HKS timing belt. It's just blue instead of purple. And the harmonic balancers on these are known to fail prematurely, especially when you beat on them too much, and when they're old and cracked, the rubber fails and the pulley literally just falls straight off. So I got an ATI super damper, and just because one of my friends gave it to me, I got a aluminum lightweight water pump pulley just to throw on there too. And then probably my biggest fear of this engine blowing up on me is due to oil starvation. So in order to combat that, I have a Tomei oil pan baffle that'll just go in place of the stock baffle and keep my oil more or less right in the middle. And then from factory, these engines use this weird little setup for the oil cooler. It's a little beehive oil cooler basically. It mounts right about here, has water that goes into it and cools the oil. It really doesn't cool the oil so much as heat up the oil faster. But I'm gonna be getting rid of that for this Chase Bay's oil filter sandwich plate that has provisions for 2 sensors as well as an external oil cooler lines to go up to it. So we'll run those lines once the engine's in the car. but for now I got it all installed in place with the factory oil pressure sensor for the ECU installed on one side and an aftermarket gauge oil pressure sensor on the other side. And then in order to actually mount this engine into this chassis, I don't think I ever mentioned it before, even though this engine was already in the car, I'm using the excessive MX-73 2JZ engine swap mounts with some excessive solid poly bushings for engine mounts. And then for most of you, this is probably going to be the biggest letdown of this build. But like I said, I'm trying to keep with a more or less stock horsepower for now, and that's mainly because I don't have the extra cash for this build to get a standalone ECU, wire harness, you know, bigger fuel injectors, fuel rail, all that stuff with a bigger turbo. And while I do already have this big gritty T78 turbo that was on it before, I'm going to be taking this off and just selling it because I bought this back in the day off of a buddy while I was in Japan. He gave me a pretty good deal on it, and I was going to use it until I more or less like actually researched this turbo, and not really going to be the best for my goals, right? Because this is like a 800 horsepower turbo that spools pretty slow, so it's, while I would make like 800 horsepower up top if I went for it with the right fuel and ECU, it wouldn't be doing me any favors while drifting because it would take so long to spool. So this is more or less useless for my needs. And like I said, because I don't really have the extra cash to spend on a single turbo kit that would more appropriately sized for drifting, I'm going to be swapping that out for the factory twin turbos, which most people get rid of because they're not really good for a whole lot of horsepower. But like I said, keeping with stock horsepower, it's perfectly fine for my goals. I cleaned them up as much as I could, replaced a bunch of, well, I'm going to replace a bunch of vacuum lines on it, and you know, a couple seals here and there, but these are all cleaned up, inspected, ready to go back in the car and make 280-ish horsepower probably, which plenty for my needs for drifting for now. And then eventually later down the line, because I have the engine built for it, we can go with some, you know, a bigger turbo, more fuel, stuff like that later. But for now, just trying to get on the track. And then aside from all that, specifically engine wise, the only extra things I really have are just some basic tune-up things, you know, spark plug wires, some boots for the factory coil packs, and I think this is a new oil filler cap. I already installed the new thermostat. This is obviously a new pulley for the time belt tensioner, a new tensioner, I actually had a new crank position sensor that I bought after like I first got this car, but then never ended up installing because I didn't want to have to like pop this off to get it out and everything while it was still in the car, so I just said forget about it. But it had like a misfire when I first got it, so I'm thinking that was the issue based on like engine codes and stuff, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Obviously new water pump. But yeah, anyway, honestly, for what I'm trying to push right now, that's about all I really think I'm ever going to need. I'm only really trying to push this engine to like maybe 500 horsepower in the future, which is well within what this block can handle without even opening it in the first place. So I think I'll be good for that. And everything else is more or less just me assembling an engine, which I'm honestly not that great at making exciting. So instead, I'm just gonna stop talking and let you guys enjoy the next however minutes of more than likely rainy engine building ASMR. Alright, and that is my engine. Basically 100% finished with assembly. Got it all ready to go in the car, all except for, you know, obviously what's missing behind it. And if you're wondering why it took so long to install the oil pan, it's actually because these mounts were clearly not, you know, intended to be used with the twin turbo oil drain, because, you know, normally it would just come out here and it would just go straight to the single turbo. But, you know, keeping twins, you got to use this thing, which comes out, you know, at an angle over here, and got the one that goes up and one that just goes this way. And it was really interfering with my mount. It still kind of is. I had to kind of bevel this out sort of to keep a sharp edge off of this hose, and I had to kind of clearance up in this middle section a bit, just kind of like create a divot for it to fit in. And then I had to shave down this side to clear this space. And it's still kind of touching right here, but I don't think it's too bad. I also had to just slightly space it out with some washers as well. But the main thing that I did to try to fit it was I took the pan to my machine shop, and I've been waiting for him to mill this down a bit. I think we took off like a total of like possibly a 1/4 inch and sunk it down basically as far as we could to where there's just enough meat on this metal to actually, you know, crush the gasket, so I don't just have an oil leak right there. And as you can see, I got a little bit of a change of scenery over here. I've been test fitting stuff as much as I can while waiting for that pan to get done, so got a lot of stuff figured out with what I got to do to, you know, get this thing mounted in the car. Had to clearance quite a few things to like fit this, get the trans in place and everything. But yeah, the engine is ready to go in the car. Just got to go ahead and get the trans on it. Gonna save that one for the next one, because I'm pretty sure this video is getting pretty long, so stay tuned for that. And obviously I'm pretty sure most of you noticed that I haven't been uploading as like on a weekly basis like I wanted to. And that's mostly just because like the oil pan holdups and stuff like that. I've just been having to like kind of knock stuff out and get stuff finished as much as possible with the time that I have. So hopefully gonna get back onto a weekly schedule now that I've kind of gotten it all figured out. But for now, if you enjoyed, leave a like and subscribe so you see the next one, and I'll see you next time.